Hi everyone, my name is Jenny and I'm a research fellow and a group leader at the Department of Chemistry at the University of Cambridge. And it's my pleasure to be here to tell you about some of the more exciting research that's in my field. So let me start by sharing my slide. You can see that I'm going to tell you about how I'm using photosynthesis and clean energy. But before I launch into it, I thought I'd give you a brief background to basically tell you how I got into this very interesting but unusual field in the first place. So I actually did my PhD in Australia, where I was researching anti-cancer agents and synthesizing and designing them and testing their effects on tumor models. After my PhD, I decided I wanted to change. I wanted to apply my skill sets to a different problem in the world, and I was quite passionate about the need for clean energy. So this is why I moved to the University of Cambridge, and I started working with Professor Erwin Reisner, where we basically developed this field, semi-artificial photosynthesis. And then I took this to apply it to more broadly to other photosynthetic systems, which I'll tell you about now. Now, first I need to explain to you what semi-artificial photosynthesis is. It's quite a mouthful. So first I need you to appreciate just how amazing photosynthesis is in the first place. So as a chemical reaction. So here we have photosynthetic organisms, and what you see is plants and also microorganisms perhaps inside the pond. And what they all have in common is that if you zoom in into their intracellular organelle called a thylakoid, embedded within the membrane is what we call the photosynthetic electron transport chain, and this is where the light reaction of photosynthesis occurs. And the most important thing to get out of this is that we have photosystem 2, which basically starts the entire process. It does the job of absorbing light and then using that light energy to split water apart into oxygen and protons. And those electrons are extracted and passed along the chain to photosystem 1, which is another protein which absorbs light and uses that light to energize electrons. Now, those energized electrons are partitioned into different pathways to do different jobs. So some of them go into the Kelvin-Benson cycle to fix CO2. Some of the electrons may go to other enzymes. So in this case, we can go for reduction of protons to create hydrogen, which is a clean fuel. The electrons can also be funneled to other pathways, some leaving the cell altogether. So this very simplified reaction that we get taught for photosynthesis is actually not able to capture the full complexity of this amazing reaction. Now, if you talk to some people, they'll tell you that overall photosynthesis is incredibly inefficient, and they would be correct, because if you think about the entire process from the beginning to the end, for example, to biomass production, there's many steps and partitioned pathways, and so that's why the efficiency is lost. And also because of the fact that light absorption isn't as efficient because of the pigments that are available to nature. And so typically you see for crops, for example, efficiencies of below 1% is usually observed. However, if you talk to some other people, they might tell you, actually, no, photosynthesis is very efficient. And they're also correct, because if you think about the individual components of photosynthesis, so the photosystems themselves, they are incredibly efficient at what they do. So photosystem 1, for example, has 100% quantum efficiency for turning light into charge. Now, chemists and physicists and other scientists have been trying for a long time to try and mimic this process of photosynthesis using completely synthetic materials. And so this is, again, for the noble goal of trying to produce clean energy, but more efficiently. And they've been successful in some aspects because they're able to produce a lot of synthetic light harvesters that can now harvest a lot more of the light, the solar spectrum, than, say, for example, chlorophyll pigments can from plants. And also because there's no partitioning now, it's very straightforward. We basically, again, increase efficiency in this way. However, what is limiting this field, really stopping it from going forward, is a lack of really good catalysts. So it's very difficult to make synthetic catalysts that can achieve all of these different outcomes. So really high rates, selective, being stable, being scalable, etc. And so if you think about natural photosynthesis and comparing it to artificial photosynthesis, they actually have a lot of complementary weaknesses and strengths. And that's where semi-artificial photosynthesis really comes in, because it's aiming to combine and cherry pick the best of both worlds. So for example, we can isolate specific components from natural photosynthesis and combine it to artificial photosynthesis, the wiring regimes within artificial photosynthesis, so that we can rewire photosynthesis to do the reactions that we want. And we were able to demonstrate this quite a few years ago. So we just basically wired photosystem 2 directly to hydrogenase, skipping a lot of the steps. And we're able to achieve a fairly reasonable efficiency. So here's another way of representing what we've done. So here we have photosystem 2. Input of electrons come from oxidation of water, and output of electrons go into here. And what we basically did here is we skipped a lot of steps, the photosystem 1 step, and we went straight from here to here. Now, the problem here was that there's a slight energy mismatch between photosystem 2, the electrons that come out of here, and the energy that's needed for catalysis. And so that means that this system here, this is what the device actually looks like in the end, is it doesn't happen spontaneously. You have to give it some energy input. Now we thought, oh, well, how can we improve on this? Well, simply we just add another a replacement for photosystem 1. And in fact, we can do better than photosystem 1. We can perhaps find another pigment that absorbs in a different region of the solar spectrum. So here, in this example, we pick this one. You can see it absorbs at 500 instead of 680. And in this way, we can boost the energetics of the electrons coming out of photosystem 2. And then we can spontaneously drive water splitting to produce hydrogen without the need for external energy. And more than that, we can swap out the enzymes to some other enzymes. So in this case, it's a formate dehydrogenase to do CO2 reduction. And all of this is autonomous. So this was very exciting. Now, this type of technology is really interesting, and as proof of concept, they definitely show there's a lot of potential into the type of things we can do. However, what is really stopping this field now is the fact that enzymes, even though they're really good in some respects, they're very unstable when they're isolated. Okay, so this is the activity profile photosystem 2 over time. And this is when we have to start thinking about, well, are there ways in which we can stabilize the enzyme, because they are very good at what they do, but they just break down when you isolate them. So this is when we turn our attention to living systems. So I don't know if people are very familiar with what's the picture that is depicted in here. So this is a picture taken at the Glastonbury Music Festival in the UK, and where they're trialing this technology where they're using microorganisms to basically extract electrons from organic matter and use those electrons to power lights and to power mobile phones. Now, these bacteria are very good at extracting electrons and giving them back up from chemicals and giving them back up into electrodes. And actually, photosynthetic organisms can do something very similar. So photosynthetic organisms like cyanobacteria contain all the photosynthetic machineries that I just described before. The photosynthetic machineries are obviously being broken down during operation, but they are efficiently repaired within the living organisms. The interesting thing about these type of microorganisms is that the electrons from the photosynthetic electron transport chain, some of them are actually expelled under light radiation. And so what that means is that we're able to interface them with electrodes and harness those electrons so that we can power small devices. And already we made several demonstration devices. So this is really exciting because we think about photosynthetic organisms as a material for technology. It's very abundant and sustainable because it's well, photosynthetic microorganisms are one of the most successful living organisms in the world, and you can see this is you can see that they're not only growing on land, but also a lot of it is found in the sea, so it's non-competitive for you know, growing the food stock. And it's not competitive with agriculture, so we can employ a lot of these materials in different regions of the world without being in competition with other things. And so really what my research is trying to do is think about how we can exploit photosynthesis and study them. So to do this, we study photosynthesis on different levels, from all the way from molecular level to subcellular level to whole cell level, and even perhaps to a higher level than that afterwards. And this allows us to really not only gain information about the fundamental fundamental mechanisms of how you know, these electron transport chains work, and how it relates to whole system functionality, but it also forms a very important basis for future biotechnology. So I already talked a little bit about how we can generate fuels using sunlight. And also power using these photosynthetic materials, but you can imagine that they would be very useful as biosensors as well. And so I'm going to stop here and just basically leave you with this slide, where essentially a lot of people do ask me this question about efficiency. How efficient are your system going to be in the long run, is how, and therefore how successful? And really, it's been a very difficult question to answer, simply because success of a clean energy technology should not depend only on the efficiency. So you can see here I have a number of different criteria for looking at how good a system is. So efficiency is just one of many criteria. And yes, artificial systems, like I described before, can be more efficient because of all the different factors I named. But actually it loses out in other things like scalability and stability. It's not able to self-repair, etc. So when we look at success, we really need to think about it in a more holistic way, and really we need to include the idea of sustainability as well, and that's really what this research is about. So I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to discussions. Thank you very much.